After returning to Broken Hill from the dangers of Luangwa Valley, motorbikes take to the scene in the form of 6 tea chests, and Kieron is given a choice. Chapter 15. 6 Tea Chests. After our mighty adventures in Luangwa, the feeling we were living in an age that could soon change rode home with us. But it was back to school, back to our 60s madness, and back to the desires of teenage boys. After we got back to the Broken Hill routine, we pestered Ted that we needed our own transport. We wanted motorbikes. Now, Ted had a problem with his boys zooming about on bikes, like yobs. So, in his own sweet way, he succumbed. One weekend, 6 wooden tea chests arrived in the back of a truck. Remember, Ted did have a fetish for picking up junk, and we assumed he'd found some odd scraps of wood and fencing for the chicken farm that was emerging like a shanty town behind our house. Joseph, our house servant, helped us unload the chests. We stared at the contents. Sean had got his bike all right, packed in 1,000 pieces. I could see Ted wanted us off the roads as long as possible, but it wasn't long before the driveway began to look like a bomb site. Weeks and weeks of tinkering later, our tenacity paid off. We patched it together and discovered it was a 1930 Velocette. The only motorbike in the world with running boards, water cooling, and a hand-controlled gear stick. Like a policeman, Sean could be seen buzzing around on this antique until it finally blew up 6 months later and ended up packed into 8 tea chests. But I wanted a motorbike more than anything, but not one like that. All the other teenagers had bikes, and I felt left out. My break came when Ted sat me down one day and told me he was taking Betty on holiday to South Africa. He sat me down one morning and asked, "Do you want to go with them, or would you prefer a motorbike?" What? An empty house for a month and a bike of my own. Paradise. On a shoestring budget, I searched for the biggest, blackest, most powerful steed in the universe, and ended up with the smallest, reddest, and weakest in the land, a Honda 65. But I had my month of paradise, except I had to look after the chicken farm. There was a carefree period at that time. We lived every moment as it happened, screaming around with our motorbike sound baffles removed and chasing girls. Clothes was the big thing at Kuntawala's. Poor old Mr. Kuntawala spent most of his time chasing us for unpaid credit, so we used to give the clothes back. They'd gone out of fashion anyway. One of my best pals was Wayne. His parents had a farm just past the army camp. A famous straight, that one. Wayne had a Honda CB 160 with the baffles removed. Spotlights dominated the front beneath a small, straight set of handlebars. Hard as I tried, I couldn't keep up in my pissy little 65. But one day, I inherited Sean's old bike, an identical one to Wayne's. Black. His was red. Hell, did we churn up some tarmac along that straight. As in all small towns, there was a leader of the pack. His name was Billy, and he was the unofficial king, and his short bullet frame, clad in black leather, could be seen attacking the pinball machine at the Rio Cafe every day. He was only happy when he tilted the thing. One look from Billy was enough to make the biggest of us cringe. But I liked Billy. He had the biggest bike, a Honda 450, and was the greatest arranger of disorder. If there was a fight to organize, Billy was the man to do it. If there was a joint to be had, he was the roller. Sean and I continued that crop of blonde hair that hung well below our eyes. The swish of our heads became famous, and friends would avoid standing beside us in case they got swiped by a greasy wad of thatch. I was sitting down at the Rio one day poking a spoon into a Coke Special, a large Coke with a dollop of ice cream floating in it. My hair seemed to form a shroud around me, but I could see out okay. An old woman came up to me and with her walking stick parted my cascading mane and quietly stated, "You look ridiculous." Only now, when I look at the old photos, do I realize she was a very observant lady. Embarrassed, I stormed next door to Michael's cafe, a small place with grubby tables and a row of pinball machines. Speakers blared out Penny Lane, the Beatles' new track. Only now does being there for those never-to-be-repeated sounds of the 60s seem a privilege. Sitting down at one of the tables, I noticed a huge black lady dancing to the music as she sat. Her colossal backside caused the seat to creak and groan, and there was a crying baby strapped to her back. Unperturbed, she stood up and swung the pickaninny around, flopped one of her breasts out, and presented a feed for it. It wouldn't take it, and shook its little woolly head from side to side in protest. She carried on dancing, and the kid still refused the offering. Then she grabbed hold of her tit, sucked it briefly, picked up the sugar bowl and thrust her nipple into it. When it emerged, it looked like a great crystallized plum. Eagerly, the baby took a hold of it and sucked happily. Of course, it meant nothing. Surely that's what it was there for. I stopped taking sugar with my coffee for a while. It wasn't long before Sean was sent to live dangerously in the northern part of the country on some mission of life and death. He liked killing things, a slight exaggeration, I admit, but he loved guns. This led him to a short career as a game ranger. He was sent packing to the Zambezi Valley, where the idea was to place the onus on conservation. This was a term he had difficulty with. The job entailed capturing baby elephants by culling them from a healthy herd. This was achieved by darting them with sleeping drugs from a helicopter. The elephants were then incarcerated in wooden pens to get them used to humans. After about a year, they were airlifted to international zoos. I was sent to the Zambezi for a few weeks to stay with Sean. It was basically another effort by Ted to harden me up. The time I spent there, sleeping under mosquito nets in the open, killing rats and using them as bait for catching vundu, a kind of oversized catfish, was a reminder that Africa was disappearing fast, and I cling to the memory of those days. What I didn't know was that Sean had a bad habit of dispensing with hyenas, the garbage collectors of nature. It was a joke at first because he thought they were vermin, but they are in fact a protected species. A very astute ranger snitched on him, and that ended Sean's illustrious career. But he was lucky. He got a job on the Broken Hill mine as an assayer and subsequently got himself a Land Rover to get into the bush and find things to kill. I was living with the family legacy of one complete failure and one devil-may-care adventurer before me, so was given little chance at anything. I wasn't worth the risk. Ted had no idea what to do with me, so he gave me a choice.